The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You are now entering the Stone Zone. Well, reports have indicated that embattled Federal Reserve Chief Jerome Powell may be about to be fired from his position by President Donald Trump. Powell is, of course, steadily refused to cut interest rates on the American people, despite the fact that both inflation and unemployment are lower today than they were the last time Powell cut rates. It was, or I should say the Fed cut rates. Pretty clear that the Fed cut rates to try to help the Democrat nominee get reelected in the last presidential election. So this decision would be a long time coming, as Powell has played political games with interest rates by keeping them artificially high. Frankly, I think it's because he wants to hurt President Trump's economic agenda. There is a significant legal question as to whether the president has the authority to fire Powell, or whether he has to wait till Powell's term as chairman and as a governor expires early next year. But meanwhile, the American consumers are suffering. If you look at Powell's record, it's clear that there's zero consistency. The unemployment rate currently at 4.2% is at the same level it was when the Fed was comfortable cutting rates by 50 basis points on September 18th of last year, and again by 25 basis points on December 18th. An additional rate cut on November 7th occurred with the unemployment rate just slightly below today's level. The rate of inflation during these cuts were either at the same level or higher than the current inflation rate as well. So it's clear that it's not President Trump playing politics with the Fed. It is Chairman Powell. Additionally, the chairman, Jerome Powell, has been plagued by a spending scandal. Federal Housing and Finance Agency Director Bill Pulte has actually called on Powell to be investigated for apparently lying while giving testimony to the United Senate about an astronomical $2.5 billion spent to renovate the palatial headquarters of the Federal Reserve in Washington, D.C. Specifically, Powell said that the renovation plan included no new private elevators for the Fed board governors, and no private dining room. He specifically said no more marble, no more fountains, no roof garden. But the plan approved for this $2.5 billion renovation has all those things in it. Senator Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming believes Powell lied before Congress, and he desperately now is trying to wiggle out of that responsibility. He's called for an inspector general's investigation of the plan. All that's going to do is confirm everything I've told you about the plan. The clamor for Powell to be fired is much deserved. President Trump spoke about it today, said it's highly unlikely that he will fire Powell unless he has to leave for reasons of fraud. Again, I think there is a substantial legal question about whether the president has the authority to fire Powell, but a master of public relations, he is increasing the pressure on Powell to resign, although were he to be charged for lying to Congress on a material matter. Remember, I was charged with lying to Congress, but Robert Mueller later was forced to admit in his final secret, long redacted report they'd actually found no evidence of Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other wrongdoing on my part. So I was basically framed, even though no misstatement I made was material. In this case, Chairman Powell has lied about the taxpayers' money, and it is very, very material. I don't think the president will ultimately fire him because of the legal cloudiness of his authority to do so. But I hear that Powell looks exhausted, and his office did late last week when we contacted him would not give us a statement confirming that he had no intention of resigning. So we shall see. I've also confirmed from my sources that the massive deep state probe that we've been waiting many years for could be announced as soon as this week. The Justice Department and the FBI are working on a massive case that's going to make the MAGA base very happy with this substantial move towards accountability. The Trump administration is looking to prosecute based on the genesis of the Russiagate scandal and the conspiracy to undermine President Donald Trump that began even before he won the 2016 election. We now know definitively that the plan to get Trump evolved from an Oval Office meeting with Barack Obama, Vice President Joe Biden, National Security Advisor Susan Rice, FBI Director James Comey, CIA Director John Brennan. They had no evidence, so they had to fabricate it. And they did so in two manners. One, the Steele dossier, which they knew was a fraud, paid for by Hillary Clinton's campaign, and discounted by the intelligence analysts at the CIA, as we now know, as not reliable. But John Brennan, according to a CIA report released just last week, insisted on including it in President Obama's intelligence briefing so it could then be used as the rationale to launch Operation Crossfire Hurricane. That was the FBI's counterintelligence operation, which was really meant to frame Donald Trump for colluding with Russia when there was no Russian collusion. And then the other fraudulent claim that the Democrat National Committee was hacked by Russian intelligence. That was invented by John Brennan. They have never produced any actual forensic online evidence to sustain that claim. They admit the FBI never investigated the computer servers at the Democrat National Committee, and they relied entirely on a third-party IT company called CrowdStrikes. At the time I went to trial, the CrowdStrikes report to the DNC was sealed, and my lawyers were not allowed to see it. But CrowdStrike's CEO, Sean Henry, who just coincidentally happened to be a former assistant of Robert Mueller's at the FBI, testified under oath to the House Intelligence Committee that he had no evidence whatsoever that the Russians hacked the Democrat National Committee. I wanted to call Bill Binney, the former CIA counter-terrorism IT chief, who would have testified that the download speeds of the download of the data from the DNC and the Clinton campaign indicated that it could not have been the product of an online hack, that it had to have been downloaded to some kind of portable drive and taken out the back door. So it appears to me that in the greatest single dirty trick in American political history, a massive abuse of power in which the full authority of the United States government and the high technology and incredible capability of our intelligence agencies were weaponized, utilizing two pieces of what they knew were fraudulent evidence to try to remove a duly elected president. The Trump administration is looking to prosecute based on this genesis of this conspiracy to undermine the president. A special prosecutor may also be in the works, according to my sources. Because the crime happened to the entire nation, the grand jury or the Dimon does not necessarily have to be brought in the Washington, D.C. swamp, where, frankly, I don't think that any kind of fair trial can be conducted, where you're certain to get a radical leftist Trump-hating judge. I've experienced that firsthand, and to get a stacked jury of partisan Democrats. Congressman James Comey of Kentucky, chairman of the House Oversight Committee, has stated that there's an additional scandal here, and that is going on at the same time. That is President Biden's lack of cognitive fitness and the use of his auto pen as a lame duck essentially nullifies the pardons that were given to a number of the Russia collusion hoax planners and perps. So I don't think that legal defense is going to work. So while many are focused on the Epstein files, and to be clear, I believe that those should all be released as quickly as possible. Later on, we're going to interview Nick Bryant, the first journalist in the country to uncover the Epstein scandal. And the fastest way to do that, again, I've urged President Donald Trump to instruct the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to instruct the interim U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York to make a motion in federal court immediately to unseal the grand jury testimony and the search warrants of Jeffrey Epstein's 2019 charges by the Trump Justice Department. One count of child sex trafficking, one count of conspiracy to engage in child sex trafficking. One cannot be in a conspiracy by themselves. Conspiracy, by definition, has to include multiple people. So I hope the president will do that, because we do need full disclosure. I remain confident the president will fulfill his mandate to defeat the deep state, and we will not get distracted by this issue when there are larger issues. I'm not saying this is unimportant. I want full disclosure, and I want justice for the victims. We're going to talk about that with Nick Bryant, the journalist who broke the Epstein story, coming right up. In the meantime, J.P. Morgan's CEO, Jamie Dimon, has called out the woke Democrats. Dimon, who I believe is a Democrat, slammed the Democrats while speaking at a foreign ministry this week in Dublin. Dimon said, I have a lot of friends who are Democrats today, and they're idiots. I always say they have big hearts and little brains. I do not understand how the real world works. Almost every single policy they have rolled out has failed. Dimon, I think, is speaking of in common sense. His comments are emblematic of the corporate elite's increased abandonment of the Democrat Party. Also, Mr. Dimon may have come to the shocking realization that the election of a Zohran Mamdani in New York City will not be good for business. In fact, Mr. Dimon just built a beautiful new corporate headquarters in Manhattan, but I wonder what Manhattan will be like when we defund the police, we do away with cash bail, and Mamdani has said that violence is a social construct, implying that he would open the doors at Rikers Island and let all these people back into the public, all of these criminals. So I think this may explain Mr. Jamie Dimon's sudden statement of the truth. Many of the elites supported the Democrats for years, and they placated these extremists within their midst. And now the monster that they helped create is out of control. Sensible, common sense Democrats are abandoning ship and seeking comfort in the greener pastures of the MAGA movement. So without a shadow of a doubt, Dimon and J.P. Morgan had their hands in the banking crisis that led to the market crash in 2008 and hurt Americans immeasurably. Dimon does not deserve to be absolved for his sins, in my opinion. But if he's willing to come aboard the America First cause legitimately, I guess he should be applauded for doing so. MAGA is, after all, not Occupy Wall Street or Black Lives Matters. We in the America First movement do not want to see our institutions obliterated. We do not want to see an end to the capitalist system by any stretch of the imagination. So I welcome Jamie Dimon and J.P. Morgan, if they're willing to cede to common sense reforms that help the people on Main Street by booting illegals and restoring well-paying jobs to the American people. This is something we should welcome, while, of course, maintaining a healthy skepticism about our new shipmates. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone. Coming up, a guy who's never gotten the credit that I think he deserves. Nick Bryant broke the Jeffrey Epstein story. He is an independent journalist working freelance. He obtained Epstein's Little Black Book. He's going to tell us about some very strange notations in the book, but nobody would print this story until Gawker, now out of business, agreed to publish a story which began the public's knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein. Nick Bryant has also written the single best book about Watergate. It's called The Truth About Watergate, A Tale of Extraordinary Lies and Liars. He's a brilliant investigative journalist. He knows the Epstein scandal inside and out. And Nick Bryant will be along here in a moment to help us parse through what's happening today and what exactly some folks may be covering up. I'm Roger Stone. You're in the Stone Zone. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial, because we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Choice Hotels get you more for your money so you can maximize any road trip. Like with the road trippers we see here in their natural habitat, the breakfast area at a Comfort Inn. Here's a dad teaching his son how to make waffles. Fluffy, golden waffles. There's a mom making sure her daughter eats some fruit to avoid the "I'm hungry" from the back seat. And a sibling standoff over the last muffin. This is the cycle of vacation maximizationing in all its glory. Check into more. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
Welcome back in the Stone Zone. A stunning new report from White Collar Fraud shows that, contrary to their claims, out-of-state millionaires and billionaires are the ones who fueled the rise of far-left socialist Zohran Mamdani. This morning on the Sid Rosenberg show, when I was speaking to John Katsimatidis, I referred to him as the Ayatollah. That's what I call him now. But his entire narrative that his campaign is a people-fueled revolution against a corrupted system is disproved by his filings at the New York Elections Board, at least his initial filings. Entities such as the Working Families Party National PAC and New Yorkers for Lower Cost PAC funneled millions of dollars into Mamdani's efforts. Because these PACs were listed as independent, this is not allowed to coordinate with Mamdani's campaign, which they've clearly done. Mamdani now continues to masquerade as the people's champion and an outsider, all the while sucking up cash from the ultra-rich. It was believed that these actions could violate New York City's campaign finance laws because coordination between party endorsements and PACs are illegal. Turns out there really is no grassroots groundswell for Mamdani to take over New York City, at least not financially. Mamdani's campaign is threatening to sue Sam Antar, the investigative fraud expert and journalist, for revealing that in their initial filings they showed no small contributions, and that 1.6 of the $1.7 million they raised came from wealthy bundlers, people who lived in places like Malibu and Beverly Hills and Greenwich, Connecticut, not the working stiffs that we're told were financing Mamdani's campaign. Initially, it showed no small contributions. Then overnight, on the New York City Campaign Finance Board's website, the largest bundler disappeared completely, and suddenly we had a slew of small contributions from Mr. Mamdani. Mamdani has threatened to sue Sam Antar, the editor and publisher of WhiteCollarFraud.com. Contacted him for comment. He said, bring it. I have all the receipts. This is just getting spicy now. But there's no question that Mamdani's policies, taxing white people, he said it, not me, defunding the police, doing away with cash bail, raising taxes across the board, that is a toxic mix. That is a formula for disaster. Whether New York can avoid that, I don't know. A poll I saw this morning showed his three challengers, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, former radio host and head of the Guardian Angels, Curtis Sliwa, and former Mayor Eric Adams, all had unfavorable ratings in the 30s. Adams was the highest at 37. It's not surprising for Curtis. He's taken some controversial positions with a career on radio. And, of course, Andrew Cuomo has the Me Too scandal following around. Mamdani's unfavorable rating was only 32, which means enough New Yorkers have not focused on the actual impact his policies could have on the Big Apple. So this is a story we will be continuing to cover. The Ayatollah is now the face of the Democrat Party, along with Jasmine Crockett and AOC. I predict it right now, yet again, if AOC challenges Chuck Schumer in the Democrat U.S. Senate primary in New York State, she will defeat him. Chuck Schumer, poor guy's living on borrowed time. But in their party has lurched so far left that Chuck Schumer, who's a hardcore liberal, is now considered a centrist. Don't go away. You're listening to The Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone, and we'll be right back with author Nick Bryant, the man who uncovered the Jeffrey Epstein scandal.
Are you paying?
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. Joining me now is Nick Bryant, investigative journalist and author. Nick Bryant is literally the first reporter in the world to cover the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. He's also written an extraordinary book on the Franklin scandal, which is often distorted, but the Franklin scandal took place in Washington, D.C., in which children were being supplied to high-level government officials in the Bush administration. Nick Bryant took his initial story about Jeffrey Epstein's little black book, which he was able to obtain from a source, to a number of media outlets. I guess he was freelancing, and nobody was interested in this incredible story about a billionaire pedophile and his very important friends until ultimately Gawker published that book. I relied heavily on that book with attribution in my own book, The Clintons' War on Women. Nick Bryant, what a long, strange road it's been. Welcome to the Stone Zone.
It has indeed been a long, strange trip, but glad to be with you, Roger.
I remember a very, very, very cold day when we were together. We were both going to meet Steve Hoffenberg, who had been Epstein's boss at Tower Financial. He later went to prison in an epic Ponzi scheme. We met him after he had gotten out of prison. He told us at the time, Jeffrey Epstein is going to be arrested for running a national pedophile ring. I think we were both a little skeptical, but of course everything Hoffenberg told us turned out to be true.
He seemed to be very psychologically damaged from 18 years in prison, which is completely understandable. So I didn't know exactly what to make of his disclosures.
Were you surprised when you came to all these major mainstream outlets with this blockbuster story? This would go on to be a story that has now dominated our politics for several days. I mean, this is a guy who died several years ago, I believe, yet the media can't seem to get enough of this story. The real tragedy here, and I know you agree with this, is getting lost in all of this are his victims. Justice for his victims, the people he damaged, the people he assaulted, the people who, in some cases, destroyed.
Yeah, and his cronies, too. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein was definitely trafficking these young girls to a wide range of people. And we know that from victim testimony. So it just wasn't Jeffrey Epstein acting alone. He was acting in concert with several other people.
Last time I interviewed you, and I think it was because you have written a book, The Truth About Watergate, A Tale of Extraordinary Lies and Liars, which I must tell you is the definitive book on Watergate. Nick Bryant managed to take a very complicated story. And by the way, Nick's not a conservative. He's not a Republican. Neither is he a Democrat or a liberal. He's just kind of a down the center investigative journalist. His politics do not bleed into his reporting. But he nails Watergate, which is why I had him on to talk about it. But when we spoke at that time, we spoke about the fact that there seems to be a commonality in all of these cases, whether it is the Epstein case, whether it is the Ghislaine Maxwell case, whether it is the Diddy case. The main perp gets nailed. Epstein gets charged with conspiracy to engage in child sex trafficking, but none of his co-conspirators are ever identified. The same with Maxwell, the same with Diddy. And as you pointed out, one U.S. attorney presided over all those cases.
Well, it was Damian Williams, who was the U.S. attorney that presided over the Maxwell trial. And he made sure that only victims that were molested by Epstein or Maxwell were called. There were 4 victims that were called, and they had no knowledge of the wider network. So he did his job there as far as containment. And then he went on to oversee the Diddy grand jury. And the Diddy grand jury was kind of a joke. I mean, I knew as soon as he announced it that it was going to be a joke. The thing about Diddy is that, and also we could say that about Epstein and the perpetrators for Franklin, for that matter, what brought all these guys down, at least as far as law enforcement, is they were getting too much media. I believe the Franklin network was certainly about blackmail, and the Epstein network was about blackmail. And then we find out that there are all these hidden cameras in Diddy's various homes, and that's been heavily corroborated. So I think that all 3 were involved in blackmail. But with Diddy, there were 5 civil cases pending against him when that grand jury was convened. And 2 of those cases had been, he had trafficked minors. And that was glossed over by Damian Williams. And Little Rod was the 5th case. And that's when it reached critical mass where the government said, well, we have to do something about this. Little Rod, his name is Rodney Jones, and he's a hip hop producer. And he was talking about Diddy trafficking underage girls and boys, and also about his hidden cameras. So with Epstein and also with Diddy, I believe that these are blackmailers, and blackmailers aren't going to be very successful when everybody knows that they've got hidden cameras. So I think that kind of concludes their careers as blackmailers.
As you know, there's been a lot of controversy about quote unquote Epstein's list. And I don't think there ever was like a formal list. You were the first person to publish his little black book, which I believe you attribute to his butler, Alfredo Rodriguez, no longer with us, although I believe it was you who noted that he circled the name of VIPs in the book who he thought were involved with sex with underage girls who might be material witnesses to pedophilia. I think there never was a list per se. Seems to me, given all the DVDs and the hard drives removed at the time of his 2019 arrest from Epstein's palatial home in New York, his island, Little St. James in the Virgin Islands, from his ranch in New Mexico, and I believe also from his apartment in Paris, that law enforcement should be able to piece together a list from watching those videos. But those videos and those hard drives seem, incredibly, to have completely disappeared.
Well, the strange memo that was released by the Justice Department and FBI last week actually said that there were 300 gigabytes of child abuse material, but there isn't anybody else in the child abuse material other than the children. And that's a little, that's ludicrous, because there were definitely adults molesting these girls. And I have no doubts that a lot of that was blackmail footage, because all of Epstein's homes had hidden cameras. So for the Department of Justice and the FBI to say that I do agree that there were over 1,000 victims, but for them to say that it was only Epstein that molested these over 1,000 victims, that is very absurd, and people are rightfully incredulous of it. That is not the truth, and I just wish that the Trump administration would just start telling us the truth on this. It keeps digging itself deeper into a hole. In March, Pam Bondi said that she was going to release the quote unquote Epstein files. And then what she released was like a nothing sandwich. There were no new revelations. And as you said, I put the black book up on the internet in 2015. And then and with that book, for the adults, we redacted their numbers. And there's over 100 victims in that black book. And we redacted their last names and their numbers. The black book that I put up, that Bondi released 10 years later, everything was redacted. So I don't know what was going on with the Department of Justice thinking that they could give us something that we already knew and think that it was revelatory. That really, I think, really got the Trump administration into trouble. And then Bondi got further into trouble when she did say that there was a truckload of evidence. That was her term. And only matters related to national security would be redacted from the documents. So now she has to tell us what a bunch of child molesters have to do with national security. And I think the crescendo of her mendacity was because, as you noted, Roger, there was a lot of disks and there were hard drives taken out of Epstein's home. Actually, the day after he was arrested, the FBI hit his home in New York almost immediately and opened up his safe. And his safe was not the dimensions of the safe that we think about. His safe was like the size of a closet. And Bondi led us to believe that all that material that was taken out of Epstein's safe was being reviewed by the Department of Justice at that time, when I have no doubt that the FBI and whatever dark malignant corner of intelligence deployed Epstein, they were looking at everything in Epstein's safe that day. And probably people did double shifts making sure what was on Epstein's disks and hard drives. So the Trump administration keeps digging itself deeper and deeper in a hole with these remarks about Jeffrey Epstein.
It is puzzling, even for me. Let me just ask you a direct question. In all of your research into Jeffrey Epstein, have you seen or heard any evidence whatsoever that Donald Trump himself engaged in any inappropriate behavior in or around with anyone in or around Jeffrey Epstein?
With Trump, Alfredo Rodriguez circled people that he said were in cahoots with Jeffrey Epstein as far as his pedophilic pandering. And a number of those people that were circled were certainly in cahoots. There was Ghislaine Maxwell was circled, Ehud Barak, Les Wexner, Alan Dershowitz, Bill Richardson, and Jean-Luc Brunel, who was a fellow pimp of Epstein's. They formed a modeling agency together, MC Squared. So, and then we have victim testimony that corroborates that these circled people in Epstein's black book. Rodriguez did circle Trump's name, and Trump said he'd never been to Epstein home, but we know that he had. And then we also know that he flew on his plane. But I haven't come across any victims that said that they were molested by Trump. So you can make with that what you will.
Yeah, I mean, I interviewed Virginia Roberts Giuffre for 6 hours, 3-hour sessions. I read all of her testimony. She said that she did meet Donald Trump. He went to a charity event at Epstein's home, which I report in my book, and that he was a perfect gentleman. Also, Roberts Giuffre, who we were told recently committed suicide. I will come back to that. Said both in her sworn testimony, but her lawyer and she both said afterwards the only well-known public figure who would help her, who would support her in a lawsuit, and who would help her was Donald Trump. I've written about Trump being on Epstein's plane. The plane flew from New York, actually Teterboro, New Jersey, to Palm Beach, leaving on a Friday, coming back on a Sunday, and Marla Maples, his wife at the time, and his daughter Tiffany Trump were on the flight. None of these flights, based on the FAA records that I examined, you reported extensively about this, show Trump going to the island. I don't believe there's any evidence he was ever on the island. He certainly denied it. So I don't think...
I have no evidence of him being on the island.
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
I said, I haven't seen any evidence of Trump being on Epstein's island.
Yeah, nor have I. So I do think this much we know. Trump definitely cuts Epstein off prior to Epstein being exposed and charged with sex crimes in Florida. And this happens when Epstein makes an improper advance to an underage girl working in the spa at Mar-a-Lago. Trump hears about this. He bans Epstein from all of his properties and from his life. Juxtapose that with Bill and Hillary Clinton, who continue to socialize with Epstein, who continue to take contributions to Epstein. And Virginia Giuffre, in her sworn testimony, says that Bill was on the island at least once. Bill has denied that. The FAA records seem to indicate that Bill was on the Lolita Express at least 26 times. That's the number that I have felt comfortable using based on research. So it's interesting to me, Epstein is clearly much closer to the Clintons than he ever was to Donald Trump. Therefore, I reject this motive that Trump is covering this all up because he himself has exposure or vulnerability. Why would you pledge to expose everything if that were the case? If you're just tuning in, this is the Stone Zone. I'm talking to one of the best journalists in the country, Nick Bryant. We're going to talk about your 501c3 that you've set up to help the victims of Jeffrey Epstein when we come right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network. Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner,
You may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. We're talking to Nick Bryant, investigative journalist and author. He is the man who broke the Jeffrey Epstein story when he obtained Jeffrey Epstein's Little Black Book. Nobody would publish that. And ironically, Gawker, no longer in business, then considered to be the mean kids of the media, had the fortitude to publish the story. And the story was kept alive by Julie Brown, a crusading reporter at the Miami Herald, whose politics are not mine, but she's a fine journalist. Nick, you've set up a 501c3 nonprofit group, Epstein Justice, that's working to ensure that all the pedophiles who used Jeffrey Epstein to satisfy their sick predatory desires are put behind bars. Can you speak about your important work there and how people can get involved in that fight?
Your audience, they just have to go to EpsteinJustice.com and they can sign up with us. Because Epstein has been in the news a lot lately, our organization is beginning to grow. And we want two relatively simple things. I mean, just that would be considered baseline morality. We want to know why the government covered up child trafficking. And when you cover up a crime, you're aiding and abetting that crime. So essentially, the government is aiding and abetting child trafficking in the Epstein case. And we want the perpetrators to be prosecuted. Very simple. If our government had any kind of decency, that would happen. And we need a majority in the House and we need a majority in the Senate. And to make this, that we can do it. I think that people are really, really fed up over this story. And our government has lied to us before on a number of different things. But this is different because it involves American children getting molested with impunity. And I think that this is an issue that can bring the right and the left together, because the right and the left have been divided and conquered. And the right and the left need to come together on this issue so we can protect our children.
In the short term, I have urged the president to direct the attorney general, to direct the interim U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York to move in court to unseal all of the grand jury testimony and evidence in Jeffrey Epstein's 2019 indictment by the Trump administration for child sex trafficking, conspiracy to commit child sex trafficking, and on the basis of a whistleblower, also very important to unseal the search warrants for Epstein's home in New York and for the island, both issued out of the Southern District of New York. I hope the president is listening. I hope he will do that. I think that would go a long way to start to answer a lot of these puzzling questions. Anyway, we have to end this here. I want to thank my guest, Nick Bryant. Again, go to EpsteinJustice.com, EpsteinJustice.com, to get in the fight to expose those who have done wrong in the name of justice for all of Jeffrey Epstein's victims. Also commend to you Nick Bryant's book on Watergate, The Truth About Watergate, A Tale of Extraordinary Liars and Liars. It is the definitive book on Watergate, why it happened, how it happened, who the good guys were, who the bad guys were, who the guys who were in the dark were. I commend that to you as well. Nick, thanks for making the time to join us today in the Stone Zone.
Thanks for listening to the Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear the Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?